Good morning and welcome. Thank you very much for joining me this week. The topic for today is when words create change. And that prompts me to ask you a question straight away. Who here believes that words can create change? They must. We use words every day, at home, at work, in our business, and the intention is that something happens as a result of us saying certain words. We use words to motivate, to shut someone down, to initiate action. Words do have power. Yet it does happen that the change we expect as a result of us saying the words is not what we're getting in return. And as an example, who here has been in a situation when you precisely what you wanted to say, yet the words just wouldn't come? Happened to me. And who here has tried to explain something of importance to another person or a group, and they just wouldn't get it? Happened as well. There are many examples where our words do not seem to be effective. A manager not able to inspire his team. A parent not able to reach their teenager. A teacher that is not able to get students to listen. An entrepreneur with brilliant ideas not able to convince the other party of their value. Words do influence our actions and also our emotions. And that is why public speaking is still #1 phobia. And who here hasn't heard sometime in their life, if you have nothing to say nothing. And that thought comes for some every so often. Yet, if we were able to express ourselves correctly, according to our intention, wouldn't that open the world of opportunities? We could be heard. We could influence a decision. We could lead our team, teach people. We could resolve a problem. We could change people's minds, change their perception. Who here thinks that if they had a better way of expressing themselves, they could have been so much further ahead? Yet words are not all. Paul Tournier, a Swiss physician and an author, said that speaking doesn't start when you open your mouth. Our communication reflects our inner state, our ability to listen, our presence. So perhaps when we cannot convey our message, it is not because we have nothing to say. It is because we haven't applied, we don't know how to structure what we have to say for the right level of impact. And perhaps we were not present to the audience with our message. And that was precisely the study that Bernice McCarthy of US University was undertaking. In 1979, she developed a learning framework called FORMAT, which we are all familiar with. And the aim was to reach more students, because she noticed that students have different ways of learning. They ask different questions. They absorbed and interpreted information differently. FORMAT, therefore, is following those key, most important questions the students were asking, different questions the students were asking. Why? Why should people care? What? What they need to understand? How? how is it to be done? And what if? What if it doesn't work? What if it exceeds our expectations? People create meaning based on what they hear. Format, therefore, expanded and organized the way they think. They expanded and organized their thinking so the words landed. The structure helped clarity, and it helped people to understand more, and more than that, to see things differently. The format therefore facilitated delivery of information, that facilitated common understanding, and it enabled conversation. Format was found so powerful, so profound, that it found its way not only in schools at universities, but also in speaking, coaching, leadership, and writing. And we know about coaching because format is often used to explain the critical alignment model. There is some level of synergy in how we understand the model and how we understand people's thinking. So I mentioned that format enabled the conversation, but to lead a successful conversation, more was required. And the things to consider were to connect, to focus, to reveal and focus on the positive expected outcomes, to ask rather than tell, and to embody the message, to speak with congruence and conviction. And I can show you how that works by just telling you about a colleague of mine, a young leader, Tom. When he started, he wanted to, of course, help his team. He prepared for every meeting very thoroughly, and he always ran it according to his agenda. His ideas were good and people were happy to listen. However, he noticed that over time, the level of engagement sort of diminished. He therefore started looking at what other leaders are doing, and he noticed that other leaders create the agenda for the meeting together with their team. So he therefore started checking with his team at the beginning of the meeting, what are you observing in your work? What concerns are at the top of your mind? And those questions woken up the interest among his team. The resistance sort of softened and contribution increased. And it was a great way forward. Tom wrote that week in his journal that to change how people think, we must first enter their world and understand it. Once he was satisfied that they have a level of conversation, he started focusing further, and he noticed that people do like to bring things to talk about, but they were focusing on problems. And he decided that he needed to change that focus. So one day he said that we cannot solve problems with the same way of thinking that caused them. And instead of asking, why is it not working? He started asking, if this works, what are we expecting to see? And that created a new level of interest. People stopped defending their problems, the current status and their whys, but started focusing on the future, how they would want things to work. That was very satisfactory outcome, and Tom wrote in his diary that questions invite people to think. Thinking creates meaning, and meaning helps people see things differently. Asking the questions that focus on the future, helps them focus on the solution rather than problem. And again, that was a big step forward. But after a while, he noticed that while the discussion is very good, he actually ends up allocating actions to his team members, and they are not always welcome. People are busy, overloaded with what they had to do anyway. So he changed his approach again. Instead of, once the conversation got to a point when some decisions needed to be made, he asked, what is the smallest thing we could try this week to progress towards the best solution? And wow, that created an enormous change of energy. People started volunteering not only solutions, but all their own services to take ownership of the parts that they were most suited for. So they started owning the solution, and that was a big win. Tom wrote in his journal then, people commit willingly to self-initiated actions. They don't like to be told what to do. So now Tom had a team that worked effectively, bringing the issues and ideas to the table, discussing them together, building them up, and then taking action, volunteering to progress the ideas to completion. And that success was noticed, obviously, by the management team who said, well, Tom has definitely made progress with his team, and people trust him. And they trust him because he means what he says, and he says what he means, and he's committed to the words that he shares. Having received that feedback, Tom wrote in his journal, words carry presence, congruence, and accountability. So in summary, in a nutshell, when words create change in how we behave and approach our work, then conversations become transformation. The new possibilities are revealed. The clarity improves. People volunteer action. Their actions become their identity. And when they change, their results shift. And in this way, the words create change, and every conversation creates the future. And that was the message I wanted to share with you today. Thank you very much for joining me, and I invited you to join me again next week.